Welcome to Calling All Voices, brought to you by the Dementia Action Alliance and the Global Council on Alzheimer's Disease. My name is Karen Love, and I am the CEO of the Dementia Action Alliance. In this podcast, you will hear from people living with dementia from the Black and the LGBTQ+ communities. They'll share stories about how resilience and persistence can help people to continue to live meaningful lives, even with the diagnosis of dementia. And you'll hear participants discuss why it's important that we call all voices to share their experiences. Today's episode will feature discussion with Chris Cavell and J.R. Pagan.
This is Calling All Voices, a podcast brought to you by the Global Council on Alzheimer's Disease and the Dementia Action Alliance. In this series, we've asked people who are living with dementia and who are part of the LGBTQ+ community to speak out and share their stories. Why, you might ask? Well, research is just beginning to show that sexual and gender minorities are at an increased risk of cognitive decline. And I am a member of the gay community, and I am over 50. And so I would like to learn more about why that is. Being old, we know, contrary to popular belief, does not dementia make. There's a lot of misunderstanding about dementia. And there's, again, not much that's known about how dementia affects the LGBTQ community. And so with misunderstanding, as we know, often comes stigma and fear. And by opening ourselves up to new perspectives, the listeners, all of us, myself included, I hope to learn more about dementia and how it affects us. And perhaps we can all gain a bit more insight into what it's like to have dementia by hearing directly from those who are living with it. And that's where we are today with this podcast. I am your host, Chris Cavell, and here's my very brief story. Years ago, I was a stand-up comedian. And I traveled around and performed in comedy clubs and cruise ships, pride parades, and private parties. And now I do something a little different. Years ago, when I was doing my career in comedy, I had a medical challenge of my own, and it completely upended my life as I knew it. And I was upset for sure, because it was not anything that I had planned. But it pointed me eventually into a new direction, and that is working with folks in memory care. And I have to say, over the years, I've met some really, really amazing people. And I'm constantly learning so much about life and courage and moving forward and the power of the brain and the human spirit. And I'm so excited to be able to share some of these stories today, because we hope that you, the listener of this podcast, we hope that you will give voice to what you hear today. Because to better understand and end the stigma behind dementia, we are calling all voices. So that was a very long intro, but I really liked it because I wrote it down. So I want to welcome in this particular episode of Calling All Voices, we're going to explore finding pride, meaning, and positivity post-diagnosis. And our guest today, my friend here, he's a man of many talents. He's worked in the travel industry, he's served in the military, and he's been a marriage and family therapist. And from what I understand, you are now a student at University of Mary Washington, taking classes, and you are an active member of his church, all while living with Lewy body dementia. Please welcome my good friend, J.R. Pagan. Nice to see you, J.R. Can I call you J.R.? Can I call you my friend?
Perfectly fine.
Good. Well, JR is short, right? JR stands for
Right.
John Richard. Okay.
That's right.
Good. All right. So, JR, let's begin with, if you could, tell us a little bit about how your journey with dementia began. How did you realize that something had changed in your brain?
Well, I had returned to school to work on my doctorate in clinical psychology. I decided I wanted to head off for yet another career, this time as a clinical psychologist. And So I was in my schooling. I'd always had a 3.74 or around their average. And then after a spill a fall I had had at a part-time job.
Sorry.
After a spill I'd had at a part-time job, um, I started to notice that I was starting to struggle with classes. And it wasn't struggling a little, it was struggling a lot. I was not understanding things I was reading. I was not able to get simple statistical solutions correct, but I could get advanced statistical problems accurate every time. It was just how it was developing was very strange. And I kept complaining that I was having a problem, and my school instead decided that I was being lazy and just didn't want to commit to the work. So I pushed on my own. I'm a veteran, and I took advantage of the VA system. Went to a psychiatric nurse that I had seen from time to time for care for my depression. And I told him, I said, Steve, this is an issue, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what's going on. So Steve put me through several tests himself, and then those tests showed that I was having some issues with attention deficit and with communication, which I had not shown before. So he sent me to have some more detailed tests that showed that I had a mild cognitive impairment that I had not previously shown. And that was really the start of my dementia journey. I was 47 years old at the time. My school dropped me and said that I wasn't serious enough about my program, so they dismissed me from it. And I was left wondering what my life was going to be like. I mean, like you said, these were unexpected changes, and I wasn't expecting them. I was like, my whole life just turned upside down. Now what do I do?
Yeah. And so at 47, and I think at 47, you realized, whoa, this is different. As you said, there, with your work, there's, certain calculations that were advanced, but then the real basic stuff was very difficult to do. I think that's a good point to make, because a lot of people, I think, are afraid if they forget, oh, where'd I put the keys? Oh, I must have dementia. Very different experience, but yours was, this was something I do every day because of work, and this is just not working. So what was your diagnosis? What was the diagnostic experience like for you? How was it that you?
It was long. It was a very long process. Again, I thank the VA system. I started out being monitored at the San Diego VA system where I was living, and they were hoping that this would clear. So they kept an eye on me closely for a while. And I saw them for a while until at one point they pulled me aside and they said, look, it's not improving. We found they thought, well, maybe this was from the spill he had. Maybe he had hit his head and we didn't realize it. There was no sign of trauma and to the brain, and they just didn't know where it was coming from. They could only see that there was some shrinkage of the brain, but they didn't know why. And so they suggested that I get ready for any possibilities. So I went ahead and with that comment, I decided that it was time for me to consider going back home to my parents. I wanted to be closer to family. As a gay man, I had friends in San Diego, but I didn't have any family in San Diego. I had left my family 30 years ago. We were still in good talking terms, but I was living my life and they were living theirs. And I needed family. So I returned home to Virginia, where I continued my diagnostic progress for a number of years. In 2016, I was informed that I have a neurodegenerative disease as that was the term that they used, which of course is the medical term for dementia. And they did it on a telehealth call, and then within about 10-15 minutes said, thank you, and thank you for seeing us today. I'm sorry about this news, and we'll talk to you in 3 months. It was really just ended.
Yeah. So no direction as far as, okay, well, here's what the diagnosis is, neurodegenerative
No,
disease. Where do you go from
in
here?
fact, they didn't even know what type of dementia. They, he had tested me for Alzheimer's at one point, and that was the extent of his knowledge of dementias as a neurologist. And when he couldn't find that it was Alzheimer's, he said, well, let's just leave it alone and see how the symptoms develop. And once the symptoms are more developed, we'll have a better idea of what it is. We now know that with Lewy body dementia, if you're not diagnosed, or when you have it, you could be taking a medicine that causes a reaction with Lewy body, that can cause psychosis, that can cause rigidity of muscles, that can cause the Lewy body to progress extremely fast. So it's real important for certain types of dementia to have that diagnosis, not to be told, just wait and see what happens.
Yeah. You had mentioned the VA system. And you get your health care through that because of your time in the military?
That's correct.
Okay.
I served in 1984 through 86.
Okay. How was that? How was that as a gay man in the military? And did that affect your healthcare, getting healthcare through the military?
Initially, I didn't have much healthcare in the military. I was outed in the military, and by somebody who thought I might be gay, who knew me from high school. At that time in '84, you were discharged for being gay. It was an RE4. It was a non-reversible discharge. Usually left dishonorable. I was fortunate. My father worked in the military, was an officer, so as to not create too much of an uproar, they gave me an honorable discharge. But they removed me because I was gay, after I dealt with a whole lot of harassment and abuse and other things going on in the military around my sexuality.
If you had been I'm curious, if you had been deemed dishonorably discharged, that's it. You wouldn't have any health insurance at all.
That's right. If I had been dishonorably discharged, I wouldn't have been eligible for VA services. I wouldn't have been eligible for any of these benefits. I would have had a harder time getting the disability insurance, the disability coverage from the VA that I have. I became ill. I started having stomach problems and getting very sick in the military. We now say that's stress related and most likely from all the abuse and everything I was going through while I was in the military. But they had done multiple surgeries on me to try to correct the problem while I was in the military. And later on, because it was honorable, I was able to fight in order to get my disability coverage, which I'm thankful for. It's provided me now where I can receive my 100% disability payment and coverage. So it was definitely a blessing, but not every gay man or woman gets that privilege. Most who get dishonorable never get to see that.
Yeah. How was it and yeah, absolutely. With your dad having the position that he had was, I'm sure, huge.
Yes.
How were you able to navigate the VA health system? Was it difficult?
Sometimes it actually continues to be difficult at times. It's actually gotten better over the last few months. They have a program right now for where they try to explain that they're accepting of all people. My audiologist wears a rainbow mask for her face mask. who knows if she's LGBTQ? She's just supported. And they have signs with bisexual flags on them and LGBT gay flags and all the other ones on all over the offices and everything, trying to show that they support everybody now. So that's been good. But I went to doctor's appointments where I was trying to get care, and I had doctors ask me if I played with dolls when I was a kid. Maybe that's why I was gay. And that was a medical doctor, not a psychiatrist. Wow. I was just blown away. And, this was not uncommon. I went to get blood work one time, and Pride came up on the news, Pride Festival, and all of a sudden the veterans started coming out with ugly, horrible, hateful things in the blood lab area, and nobody stopped them. Nobody said anything. All I did was crawl into a corner and just hide. So, it was really, really uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh. Well, you had mentioned, now the VA system is attempting to show that they are gay friendly. One of the practitioners has a rainbow flag, which is actually called a pride flag, right? So they're showing, we're with you. What does it, how does it feel like to see that? I mean, what does pride mean to you, and why is it important?
Well,
as a gay person?
Pride is important to me because it's about being whole and complete. It's about being allowed to be everything I am, without stigma, without having to hide anything. I'm a gay man. I'm also a Christian man, which is something people seem to not think is possible. But here I am, and I can be that out loud and be proud about it. I can stand up to it. It means that I don't have to hide my identity and don't have to be ashamed. I mean, and that's, I think, one of the bigger things is that, for many years I was ashamed of who I was, what I was, and that shame isn't there anymore. That shame doesn't have to be there anymore. And, if somebody has an issue, it's their issue, but I can stand tall.
Do you feel like dementia has helped you to get to that point, or where, as far as feeling like, I don't care,
I started getting to that point before the dementia, but the dementia has definitely changed things. I'm more, I reach out. I don't wait for people to reach out to me. I reach out to them. I am a moderator in a dementia group, and I assist the DAA on a couple of different projects, and I'm a speaker. And so these things have caused me to have more of a voice. If anything, I've become extremely vocal. And that can be a good or a bad thing, but in this case, it's been a powerful thing for me. It's allowed me to show my pride more visually, and to show people that, in that for us that a gay man can be living with dementia and should be supported. I belong to a men's group of gay men, and for Fredericksburg, down the 30 minutes from me, it's a small community that's got a good, strong gay support system, and their gay health center and everything, it focuses on AIDS, which is great. But they said, oh, we want to change our focus to be more health oriented all the way around. Mm. When I said, well, what about those with dementia who are often living single or without familial support? They said, oh, that's too big an issue for us to focus on. And, me speaking out and being proud enough to speak out, it gives me an opportunity to show people that this is not a too big an issue. This is an issue that we should be talking about. This is an issue that's in front of us. We can't be putting it aside.
Yeah, exactly. I think, with HIV and AIDS and having that be the topic, years ago, that was something that people didn't talk about. They're like, oh, I don't know about that. And there was, a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding, and it just seemed too overwhelming. But I think, yes, as you said, being able to say, this is who I am, and this is what's needed, I think is
Absolutely.
yeah, I love
And
that.
I, as a gay man, I also mention to people that for me, if I'm not in a relationship, who's going to be my care partner? Well, all I've got left, if I'm lucky enough, all I've got left is my family. And that means I have older parents that I have to go to for support, who are also aging and going through their own changes. So somebody who's gay may have actually a whole lot of other additional challenges that they have to face on a daily basis. I'm in a household where 3 of us are going through cognitive changes: my mother, my father, and myself. And that's what I have. For the person who doesn't have any family, they may be living in a home alone and they have no one to reach out to. Or they may be in a situation where their family just doesn't want to deal with them. And better to put them in a home than to face the situation of having to support them.
Oh. Yeah, that's one of the challenges I think with folks who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. As we get older, as we age, there are a lot of people who are not partnered, who are living alone, who you are fortunate in that you have a biological family that can take you in.
That's right.
I grew up in a very large family, and I have a lot of brothers and sisters, so I'm fortunate in that way as well. I don't have kids, but I do have that family. But people are living alone. So how, if you think about your life and how you've been able to go out and get these network of people, these extended family, if you will, your church and your men's group up in Frederick. How do you find these people? How are you able to spend your time this way? How did you come in contact with finding new family to surround yourself?
I reached out and I decided that I couldn't stay isolated. I couldn't stay quiet. I couldn't stay. Even after I moved here, my parents got me into a townhome that they bought. And that was great. I mean, I appreciate that they had the ability to do that, but I was terribly lonely. I was terribly alone. And, I had to reach out and say, I needed spiritual support. I had to reach out and say I wanted to go to school because I wanted to keep my brain going somehow. I had to reach out to DAA and to LBDA and tell them, hey, is there a support group out there? And what can I do to help it grow so that there's more of it? And that's, so I work with that. So I had to have a voice. I had to be able to speak up and say something. But hopefully what I get to do now is I get to tell other people that it's out there, so they don't have to wait until they're at the edge of their voice to speak up. I can let them know ahead of time and that there is support.
Yeah. I think one of the great things about the idea behind this podcast is, so many people, especially people who are gay. I know for me, when I came out, I was like, I don't know anybody who's gay. I don't know anybody who's gay. And I felt so alone and so separate from everything that I knew. And for people who may be gay and just getting diagnosed with dementia, they might be like, I don't know anybody with dementia. I don't know. This has completely changed my world. Being able to hear your story and know that there are ways to live and to navigate life, after being diagnosed, I think that's huge.
And they can talk about it. And they
Yeah,
can
you can
talk about it. I mean, because when even if you're coupled, how does a lesbian couple or a gay couple talk about their partner when they're in a group and all they hear is about wives and children or husbands and children, and are they safe to mention that they have a husband too, or are they safe to say that they have a wife? Is it safe to mention that one of them might be facing an HIV health issues, and these are things that I've actually seen happen, where people were very uncomfortable. They were afraid to speak up, But when they heard somebody else say it, when they heard somebody else say, I'm gay and this is what I've gone through, then they finally say, oh, thank you. By the way, I am married and I have a husband, you know, and they can finally be proud of that and say, yes, my husband supports me in what I'm going through.
Yeah.
So.
That's good. That's great. That's great. Let me go back a little bit. You had a little bit ago, you had mentioned about pride, and for you, going to church was something that gave you a sense of pride. And you'd mentioned that admitting that you are a person of faith sometimes gets received not so well in our community. How were you able to get into church? I mean, was that a factor as far as finding a church community and getting involved and engaged in your church community?
Absolutely. And by the way, it's both communities, both sides of the community that kind of sometimes give you strange looks, because the straight community, the heterosexual community, sometimes has an issue with how can you be gay and Christian too.
Yes, true.
So,
very, very true. Very true.
But I struggled with it for years of actually being a part of church. I actually, when I came out to my best friend as being gay many years ago, I was attending Christian church in San Diego, and he called me, a plague that just wouldn't go away. And I still hear the voice, and it was the last time I attended church for a long time. I was terrified of the idea. When I finally decided I needed a church, I remembered that some of my gay friends had said, well, they had gone to an Episcopal church, and Episcopal churches, are accepting of LGBT community. And so I thought, great. So I looked up, the first Episcopal church I could find, and I attended service. And then afterwards I went to the priest and I said, I am so glad to be here. And tears had been in my eyes from the sermon and everything. And I said, can I ask you, how do you feel about diversity? And he kind of got stiff and tall and said, I think you're talking about homosexuality. We don't quite accept that here.
Oh, wow.
And I was flabbergasted. And the minute I heard the medical idea, the way he said homosexuality, it was as though he was talking a diagnosis. I knew something was up. And I learned that day that there are two sides of the Episcopal Church. There are some that accept it, and there are some that don't. But I was really fortunate. I had a gentleman out, must have been out in the hall, who heard me talking to the priest. And as I came out of the office, he said, I think you want to check out St. George's in Fredericksburg downtown. And so I called them up. I was so angry at the moment. So I called them up on a Sunday, and they left a message. I was like, I need to know, I'm gay, and can I be accepted there? And if not, just tell me so I don't even bother wasting my time. Monday morning, I got a phone call from this wonderful woman, and she goes, is this John Richard? I said, yes. And she goes, my name is Gay and I love gays. and she was a priest by the name of Gay. And she was the sweetest woman. And she invited me to their church. And that was my experience coming back home to church. And I haven't left since.
And going to that particular church, finding a church that was accepting of who you were. And I have to say, JR, to be able to first say to the minister, hey, this was a really great experience. Thank you so much, Ruba. And then to be confronted with that answer, I feel for you. And I'm sorry that happened. But I have to say, I'm very impressed that you continued to keep searching, because for you, you're like, I like going to church. I want to keep doing this. And for you, you needed that support, that community to help you and to find a support system there. So that's really awesome that you did that. And it's continuing to fuel you and give you optimism and social engagement and all that sort of thing.
It really has. I mean, I think that anybody and everybody needs some form of spirituality to help them work through loss, because a dementia diagnosis is about grieving. You're constantly grieving the old you that disappears daily, and the new, and trying to find reasons to celebrate the new you that's suddenly showing up that day. But it's real important, and I strongly believe that in my higher power, which I call God, taught us to love. And that is all that we're required to do, is love one another. And I needed that love. I needed that love. I needed that support. And I am so grateful that I was able to find it with a group of people. I'm since become a monastic for a community called the Community of the Gospel. That's an Episcopalian dispersed monastic group. And we have gay members, straight members, men, women, everyone. It's a wonderful supportive group. And I think it's absolutely a must, whether you're Buddhist or Jewish or Hindu, you need to be in a group that supports you.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you just to kind of end with this last question. And what advice would you give others then who maybe have just been diagnosed with dementia and or have had it for a while and feeling really down and need to know, how do I get to be more positive? How do I find meaning now that I have this diagnosis?
Fortunately, if they found this podcast, that's one of the things that they can do to start. I get involved with everything, and I think you need to. I think anybody who's out there who's just gotten a diagnosis first needs to understand their diagnosis, understand that they don't have a timeline, that contrary to popular belief, you may live 2 years or you may live 20. So stop acting like you're going to die tomorrow, and start living for your life fully. And find support groups, find activities. I know people who've started up painting or started up photography or started going back to school. I just this year started going back to the gym, and I've been loving it. You just got to start living.
Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing all this and telling your story. And we've talked now a couple times, and I really, really enjoy talking with you, JR. You are very positive, and I love that you have found so many ways to continue to be positive, and that you're sharing that with so many people. And actually, you have a perfect segue that you just gave me for our the next guest that we're going to have on the podcast, who is going to talk about the power of creativity, and her finding art for her gave her whole life a whole new meaning, and was just amazing. So thank you for that segue. I don't know that you knew that was going to happen, but thank you so much for talking with us today. And I hope to talk very soon with you again.
It's always an honor. It really is.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Calling All Voices. If you're interested in learning more, please see the episode notes for this podcast. In the episode notes, you can find more information about Calling All Voices and the work of the Dementia Action Alliance and the Global Council on Alzheimer's Disease. The creation of this podcast was sponsored by Otsuka America Pharmaceutical, Inc. The views expressed in this podcast reflect the views of the speakers, not the views of Otsuka America Pharmaceutical, Inc. If you liked what you heard today, please make sure to subscribe to the series, share a review, and let others know about it.